Good morning, good evening. Hello to you wherever you are watching this in the world. This is Adobe Live. I am Renee DeCherry. I'm the marketing manager for drawing and painting here at Adobe, and I'm really excited to be the host for this special session. So this is day 2 of a 2-day stream. Yesterday, we did a little bit here with Spencer Nugent, who is an incredible teacher, incredible industrial designer, award-winning artist, who's going to teach you a little bit about how he draws so that you can draw even if you think you can't. Now, let me tell you a little bit about both Adobe Live and about South by Southwest, because this is a special stream. South by Southwest is an awesome conference they do every year in Austin, and it's all about technology and creativity, and that's why we wanted to invite y'all to watch us here on Adobe Live. Adobe Live is Adobe's awesome streaming program where they do learning every day of the week, constantly on just about any topic you'd want to learn in Adobe apps. So if you want to be a UX designer, come learn. You want to do video, you want to draw, we're going to teach you. And so today, that's exactly what we're doing. I've got Spencer here, and he's going to teach you how to draw. So Spencer, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thanks for having me on, Renee. It's a pleasure and an honor as always. And I'm excited. Hopefully everyone's excited as well to get your hands a little dirty and start drawing. It's actually a lot easier than you think. Okay. And I'm just a little bit about myself. So I'm a product designer or industrial designer, which basically means that anything you touch or interact with, I kind of know how to design. And it all begins for me with imagining concepts and sketching those concepts on paper. Okay, it's a really useful and helpful tool when I'm coming up with ideas and concepts. So been doing this for about 15 years now as an industrial designer, also teaching a bit. And to help you understand that it is possible for you to draw, I actually was a math major in college. So I wanted to be a high school math teacher. I was neck deep in calculus and differential equations and all that stuff, and met a friend who introduced me to design. And after dipping my toes in, realized, oh, I'm actually okay at this. So decided to keep doing that, and the rest is history, I guess.
You're more than okay at this. And what I love is that you have so many simple tips that just make it like dead obvious to the kind of people that don't normally think they could draw. And maybe that comes from that math background. I'm not sure, but it's great the way that you're able to teach these things.
A little bit. I've had to work hard to kind of see things in my own way and make that work. So that's something I've had to work on over the years. And I have my own ways of understanding perspective and drawing concepts and breaking things down. So thanks to awesome mentors and professors and people like myself who like to draw, I've kind of put together my own package of tips and tricks and little bits of information that help me out.
Well, we're grateful to have you. We're going to start on paper again today, right? Because that's what we did yesterday.
Yeah. So yesterday, if you missed the stream, we did a little bit of pen and paper drawing, showed you some tips, some warm-up things. We'll do some warm-ups a little bit different today. Maybe to push you a little bit harder, see if you can challenge yourself. But we'll be starting on paper. And not because we hate digital or anything, but sometimes all you have is a pad of paper. And a lot of the techniques that I show you can use on paper as well as on something like an iPad Pro with Adobe Fresco.
And I think that's what people don't realize is that digital art is not really different. At least it shouldn't be.
Yeah, it's all about how you draw, not what you're drawing with. I like to think that even if someone gave me a crayon or a dry erase marker, I should be able to come up with something that communicates, because design, at least the design I do, is about communicating ideas. It's listening to people, understanding their needs, and communicating solutions that solve those problems. All right. So I've got a few tools here and just a couple examples of things you might want to draw with. So I've got a few pencils, 2 pencils, ballpoint pen, some felt pens as well. And I'm going to just start with a Sharpie. I think a lot of people have a Sharpie, so these are pretty ubiquitous, if you will, and accessible. Okay, so a couple things that we went over yesterday, but I'm going to remind you, because if you're like me and you forget a lot, I need a lot of reminders. Okay, so how you hold your pen is important. Okay, we talked a little bit about this yesterday. Made Renee super nervous, but I try to hold my pen about halfway up the barrel. Okay. If you're feeling really confident, you can even back off the tip a little bit more. So if I'm writing something, you know, I might hold the tip of my pen a little bit closer here. Right. Hello, welcome. But as I'm drawing, what I want to do is back off a little bit, because if you notice, if my hand is close to the tip here, I can't really see the rest of the paper, as much of the paper, I should say. But if I back off a little bit, or a lot, I can see so much more here, as you can see on camera. So that's my first tip. The next tip I'm going to give you is you want to try and draw with your shoulders. So before we even start drawing, what I like to do is stretch a little bit. We did kind of a very simple shoulder stretch yesterday, but just okay. If you draw with your left
stretches.
Yeah, if you draw with your left or right arm, just basically extend your elbow to the opposite side. So if I'm using my right arm, I'm going to extend my elbow to the left, and then kind of get my hand here and just pull in. All right. I had a shoulder pop. I even had a shoulder pop. So just pull. I should feel real good there. And then you want to go overhead. If you can't grab your elbow overhead, that's fine. Sometimes you can just grab your wrist and just pull in and stretch. All right. Now we're good to go. Okay. The reason for that is we're going to be drawing with our shoulder. Okay, you don't always have space to draw with your shoulder, meaning extend your arm and swing everywhere like this. Sometimes you have to use your wrist, but for the most part, we're going to try and draw with our shoulder. Also, I just want to mention that if you're watching and you have ideas of what you like to see being drawn, feel free to put that in the chat, and I'm going to be keeping an eye on some suggestions here.
That's right. And I'll help Spencer out too. If you've got any questions, put them in the chat and I'll be sure to try to get them to him.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. So hold your pen lightly, but also halfway up the barrel, stretch your arm, and we're going to draw with our shoulders. So I'm going to try and lock my wrist here, and let's do a couple quick warm-ups. So I always do straight lines. Yesterday, I showed you that you can put dots on the paper and draw between two dots, a nice straight line. A couple of things, if I want to dig in a little bit deeper here, you might notice that I'm not drawing slowly, okay? And I'll show you why. So one reason is if you draw slowly, it's more likely that your hand's going to wiggle, okay? So I've got a little wiggle there, wiggle there, wiggle there. Yeah. Wiggle. All right. If you want those like cool designer sketches, you got to sketch a little bit faster. It also limits the amount of time that you give yourself to make a mistake, which maybe sounds counterintuitive because you're moving really quickly here like that. But if you're a bit more experienced, you can just warm up with a nice straight line. Whenever I do this, I feel like the robot in the robot in iRobot, the movie. Have you seen that?
I have, but I don't remember it very well, sadly.
There's a scene where the robot's drawing a bridge and its arm is kind of just moving. Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of that, where, you know, when you draw with your shoulder, you're not allowing yourself to do these little human things. You know, it's almost like you're a little bit of a robot.
I've been meaning to rewatch that, and AI as well, because I do love robots as well.
AI is an interesting one. We can talk about that offline. Stanley Kubrick. Okay, so after straight lines and you've done a few pages, if you want to flip your page, you can do that. I'll be responsible today. And then we'll just do some circles. All right. So to do the circles, I'm going to do what's called ghosting, which is I'm hovering over the paper without touching the paper. And then I can draw the circle. One thing I forgot to mention, well, two things. Notice how my paper is kind of at an angle. I'm trying to pick an angular position that's the most comfortable for me, because I don't want to have to force myself into some awkward position when I'm drawing, because that's going to increase the chances that I'll mess up. The other thing we want to pay attention to is your relationship. I guess the correct term is parallax to the paper. So if I'm off at a weird angle, or my paper, let's say I'm looking at my paper this way and I'm on some weird angle. It's really hard to show with this overhead, but if I'm kind of slouching or not maintaining good posture, it can distort my sketch and how I see things, because drawing is really about imagining your concept, okay, drawing with your hand, and then being able to evaluate what you did and see if you need to make any changes. All right. So if I'm looking at a weird angle, it's going to be harder for me to see areas where I can improve. All right. So these circles, I try to make about 2 to 3 inches in diameter. Typically, it's just enough for me to get my shoulder feeling real warm. All right. So a little bit, we'll do some ellipses and then I'll give you an extra warm-up exercise that we can do with our circles. So another thing you can do with your circles, and this is more about control, is seeing if you can sketch concentric circles.
Whoa.
All right, seeing if you can do some concentric circles. So it's a really hard warm-up to do, but there's one.
That's really great, though. You're doing really good.
Well, you said that, and then I started messing up, right? But it is hard to do. You have to really focus.
That's tricky.
But it's a good way of helping you maintain control, because the goal is, like with the first example I did, to maintain a nice proportion. Right. Okay, so it feels like a circle. The other warm-up exercise we can do that is also challenging is to draw squares. Nice. Okay, so I'll do a few squares here. I'm used to drawing straight lines in any direction, so I don't have to rotate my paper. But if you can draw a straight line, say at this angle, it's okay to rotate your paper like that. Okay, and then draw the next line, rotate again, draw the next line.
That's the best way for you to get a straight line.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and we'll talk about this little crossover move here that I did in just a sec. So our next warm-up would be drawing a series of squares. This one's really hard, so I may not get this.
Okay.
And trying to draw a circle inside. Okay.
Oh, I see. So you're trying to and you're ghosting the line. We're okay with ghosting lines, but not people.
Ghosting. Yes, let's not ghost people.
Yeah.
So definitely respond to your texts.
Yes.
Unless you're a terrible person. Just kidding. So let's draw another circle here. All right. So you can see it's pretty challenging. You can see I got these 3 spots here, and here as well. So a couple extra exercises for you, but I do want to do ellipses. Do you know what an ellipse is?
Yes, the ellipse is a circle in perspective.
Right, ellipses are circles in perspective. I have a handy dandy cylinder here to kind of show you. So the top is a circle. And as I rotate this cylinder, notice how, let me move my paper here so you can see a little bit better. Yeah. Notice how the top starts to look like an oval. Okay, so an ellipse is essentially a circle viewed at an angle in perspective. Okay,
right.
Why is this important? Well, if you're drawing products, especially things that people make, chances are there may be an ellipse on that product. Just saying, might be things like a camera, it might be a thermos, might be a remote control, something like that. So to warm up with my ellipses, remember, as I rotated this, you can see here's an oval that looks a little skinnier. And as I rotate it a little bit, it looks a little bit more open until it's a circle. Okay.
Right.
So I want to be able to draw a series of ellipses that progressively open. And you can do this freestyle on paper. I'll show you 3 ways on this one sheet. All right, a little bit of overlap there. I'm not as worried about the accuracy, but if that's something you want to focus on, you can do that as well. By accuracy, I mean the overlap on these lines, okay?
Yeah.
So I'll do 2 of these. All right, and notice that I'm progressively trying to open the ellipse, almost like we're rotating our cylinder.
Just giving it a little bit of a tilt there. And, yesterday you were talking about how you want to feel your muscles really warming up as you're doing this before you start drawing.
That's right. That's right. I actually took a course once with a friend of mine called Sketch Aerobics. And it's literally where you're drawing fast, you're moving your shoulders, you're drawing lines, you're moving your whole body as part of this activity. It's really fascinating, but you're like drenched in sweat by the time you're done. All right, so the other way to do this is we can draw parallel lines and also another line here, and I'll show you. So with the parallel lines, we can actually draw our ellipses between. And this might be easier for you because we actually have a target. A lot of these warm-up exercises and drawing and visualizing things, it's kind of like life, where when you set a goal, you don't want to fixate so much on the moment, but rather think about the objective, right? And the objective being trying to touch these 2 lines. I'm not as worried about the in-between stuff. Okay, so that's one way to do it. And then the other way is to try and draw your ellipses so that we have a half and half split on our ellipse right there. You see that? So half and half, right? And we'll do our series just like that.
Do you find one is easier than the other for you, or?
Personally, I like doing either no lines or the two lines. The center line is probably the hardest, and I guess I should do more of those if I want to get better, right?
Right. That's the trick, though.
All right. So warm-up exercises can feel frustrating sometimes in the sense that you might be wondering, why is he doing this? Why is he drawing ellipses? This doesn't make sense. And yesterday I showed you an example of what you can do with your warm-up exercise. So I'm not going to do the same example, but I'll just show you. I can find it here. We had creative chaos yesterday. There we go.
Yes, we did.
So you may notice here on this example or on this warm-up sheet, for example, we were able to draw a car from this. Well, we can do other things as well. So let's say I wanted to design a new coffee mug or something. I'm going to draw an ellipse here at an angle. Okay. And then I'm going to draw some straight lines from the edge here. Maybe it's a carafe or something like that. I'm going to redraw this ellipse. Okay. And I know what the bottom of the carafe will be, an ellipse, something like that. And now I just get to pick the shape in between, something like that, for example, and something like that. So being able to kind of see the structure of something is super helpful if you're trying to draw a product. And we can even split this here, for example, maybe add some shading for a different material. And there's a quick concept from our warm-up.
That's amazing.
Sharpies are great because they're cheap, they're easy to find, and for me, they kind of take the pressure off making a perfect drawing. All right. So if you've done this, if you've been following along, you've done this, you've created your first sketch in perspective, actually. Your first sketch in perspective. The other thing I like to say, I said this a lot yesterday, if you can draw a box, you can draw anything. All right. So we're going to draw some boxes.
Okay. I'm excited for that because it's kind of a revelation to be able to see things in different boxes when you're looking at them around you and you're like, how would I draw that? Like if you can make it into a box, you can kind of draw it with the way that you explained.
Absolutely. So before the show, Renee and I were talking a little bit about perspective and how we see things. There are many ways we see things in the meat space, if you will, in real life. Okay. So I have a couple objects here and I'm going to use these to kind of show you a couple examples of real life perspective. So let's start with, let's see if my camera will show this one. So let's start with this guy. Okay. So here's a clear box. It's slightly orange and my kids have kind of wrecked it, but little orange box. And the reason I have this here is you can kind of see the edges, right? As I rotate this, you can kind of see those dark edges. All right. So this is what we're going to try and draw and understand in perspective. So if I place this box somewhat centered on the camera, okay, notice there's a smaller box inside the big box, or this line right here. So here's our outline. Right. There's a smaller box inside. Okay. That is quite literally perspective. Okay, so with perspective, there's a couple things. We're going to think about scale. All right, so like I said here, we have the outline of this box that's a little bit bigger than the inside. We're going to talk about position. All right, so more on that later. We'll mention detail. Yeah, position and point of view. I think that was a term we used. All right. So those are some things we're going to think about. So let's say we want to draw a box like this. This is called one point perspective. And the point of perspective you can imagine is something like that little dot you see in the box. All right. If I were to extend these lines way back, they would converge at the center of a scene. So without confusing everyone and getting too far into the weeds, here's what we're going to do. We'll start with a point on the page, something like that. And if I draw a box here, okay, and I draw another box like this, could be a rectangle, could be a square, the same shape, whatever you want to do. And if I just draw through the corners, I should, if I did this accurately, looks like I didn't, but that's all right. We'll just adjust our box here. Okay, so now I have two boxes and we have corners, right? So this is a little bit more forced perspective, but I can do stuff with this. If I draw a line like so and a line like so, right? And maybe some lines here like this. Okay, that could be the inside of some ceiling, right? And I could draw these lines like so to divide that up. If I want to draw like a little window here, notice that this line looks like it's going to the central point, right? Same thing here. All right, so this is how we build perspective. If I want to put something down here on the wall, we can do that. Maybe it's a baseboard or it's a fireplace or something. Sky's the limit with your imagination. All right, but basically this 1-point perspective setup is something like this. If you can draw a box inside a box or square inside a square, okay, find that center point and just draw the corners, you have essentially a 1-point perspective setup. All right.
Nice.
So with 2-point perspective, we'll go back to our little cube here. With 2-point perspective, essentially what's happening is instead of looking at a face of the box, we're now looking at an edge. You see how see how that changes? So we're now looking at the edge of an object. And if I move, this is going to be kind of hard to show. Ignore the tapering of the sides of the box here, but you're going to be drawing something like this. All right. So because of the camera lens I'm using, it's a little bit harder to see, but there's a tapering that happens. So I mentioned in perspective, there's scale. So this front edge should appear to be wider than the back edge here.
Right.
And this front edge should appear to be wider than what's called the receding edge, which is that one. This just receding just means that this is further away from this edge. That's closer to me, the viewer. Okay. So to do that, we can start by drawing either this edge. We can draw the top shape. You can decide however you want. Okay. If you want to take a picture and even practice, you can do that. Just take a look at it. We talked a little bit about that yesterday. You can take a picture of an actual object and kind of draw over it. All right. So for 2-point perspective, I'm going to draw 2 lines. All right. I did something a little tricky there though. All right. So I started by drawing 1 line here, and then I rotated my paper so I could get a little bit of a taper.
Right. Because they're not parallel. That's not parallel.
They're not parallel. If you're drawing in perspective, and it's important to draw in perspective because it's a lot like speaking. If you're communicating with someone, you want to use the right words to express an idea or concept. Perspective's like that. If your perspective's off, it might feel a bit alien and unfamiliar, and it's a lot harder to communicate that idea. So if I were to draw parallel lines, right, it does communicate that this is an object, but it's going to feel weird. It's actually even hard for me to do it. Yeah, because I'm so used to drawing in perspective. But if I were to just draw parallel lines, check, I've drawn an object, but it's going to feel a little bit weird as opposed to 2-point perspective. So here's my little tip. If you can draw a box like this and you want to draw in 2-point perspective, all you have to do is think about, okay, this front edge here, do this in red. Okay, so these front edges should appear taller than the edges toward the back. All right, so the red edges should appear taller than, and this one would be invisible, but the red should appear taller than or wider than our green edges. Okay, so to do that, I'll just draw something like this. This is going to be a bit exaggerated, but and with 2-point perspective, all of your vertical lines are parallel. Okay? Right. So something like that. I'm making some corrections on the fly here, but we want to make sure that if I take my magic finger calipers here and just measure, this front edge should be a little bit wider than that receding edge. Okay. I
don't know why I want to make them the same or parallel, but I see the difference immediately when you're showing it. Like I see it.
Yeah, it might be a little bit easier to see on this guy. Let's see if I can. Yeah, it might be a little bit easier to see as I rotate this. Yeah, it needs to be a little bit bigger, or the camera needs to be further away, but this edge should appear to be a little what's the word? Like wider. Yeah, it should appear to be a little bit wider than this back edge. Okay.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah. So I'm going to redo that because I'm a little bit off there, but something like this. Okay. All right, there you go. So 3-point perspective, if you start with something in 2-point, it just means that, so the word point refers to what's called a vanishing point. Okay, I didn't mention that. So like our 1-point example that we started with, this central point here and here is called a vanishing point.
And that's where all the lines converge. We talked about convergence yesterday.
Yeah, so one way to see perspective in real life is to just go outside. If you live in a city, it's even easier. Definitely put on a mask. And you can look down a road, and you'll notice that the road, you've probably seen something like this. Actually, I'll just do a quick aside here. So you've probably seen something like this, right? You've got the road and maybe some buildings here. Okay, things like this.
Yeah.
Right, if I just shade in between, now we have the sides of some buildings. You've probably seen some setup like this. All right, there's the center of our road, and there's our buildings. Pretty simple and fun activity if you're trying to just figure out perspective and learn a few things, right? You can draw something like this. Pick a point in the middle, all right? Or even take a photo. You can check out Adobe stock, see if they've got some great photos of cities, for example, and you'll kind of see this type of thing set up. Maybe there's a crosswalk here or something, right?
Abbey Road.
Maybe so. All right, some clouds, whatnot. I think there was a question yesterday about landscapes, so I'll try and talk about that a little bit today as well. But this is another use for 1-point perspective. Okay. Someone in the chat says we're off on a vanishing point tangent. Absolutely. But I do want to make sure you understand at least what that vanishing point is. So vanishing, things disappear at that point. So the buildings, for example, in a scene are big when they're close to us. And the further away they go, or the closer to that point, right? There's a horizon line here. This is where like all the mountains would be like really small, or the sky meets the earth, so to speak. That's where everything vanishes. So think about it that way. Vanishing point, where stuff disappears off in the distance. And you can see this in real life, and that's how you're going to connect what you're drawing with how you see things. Okay, so 3-point perspective just means that we have a vanishing point off to the right. And really, I don't have paper big enough to show this, but I'll just move my paper off to the side here, and we'll just extend over. So if I extend this line here, right, it looks like they converge at some point. Okay.
Right.
So that's kind of what I'm doing. And if I had some paper going the other way, I should be able to do the same thing. All right. So we have a vanishing point off to the, we'll just call this VP2, and over here, VP1. All right, so that's going to help create perspective. Well, with 3-point perspective, and I actually sketched this with 3-point, with a 2-point perspective, we would have this line here, the front edge, and our other edge being parallel. But since it's 3-point perspective, these vertical lines now appear to converge.
So the last point's at the bottom.
Yeah, so there's a third point way off the page, bigger than my desk, that all of this stuff would taper to. And you've probably seen 3-point perspective in real life. Okay, and we'll talk about some other perspective stuff as well. You've probably seen 3-point perspective, much like I'll keep drawing a building since we had that in the 1-point example. But if you look up at a skyscraper, for example, you might see something like this. Okay.
Right.
Might see something like this. Maybe this is a sidewalk, and you've got some, and this is a bit of what you'd call forced perspective, but all these lines, okay, this is not a tapered building, it's a rectangular building, but all these lines would converge to a point up top. We've got lines here and lines here that would converge to a point somewhere, and the top of the building and the bottom converging to another point. All right, so my recommendation is to draw from observation, so that you can draw from your imagination. Okay, so you have to put all this stuff in your mind, kind of open your eyes, see the world around you, and then you'll better be able to connect these principles with real objects, and that's going to help. So Renee had an interesting question as we were chatting and getting ready. How do you know, how do you see perspective in the real world? You know, if you have objects that are in different positions, how does that make sense?
Well, I feel like I see all of them sometimes. Sometimes I see 1 point, I see 2 point, I see 3 point, all at the same time around me. And I'm like, wait, how do I draw that?
Absolutely. So one thing that artists do, and this is a bit more complex, but one thing that artists sometimes do is we do what's called a 5-point perspective. Okay, so this is where it's gonna get kind of crazy. So you might see, for example, okay, just follow along with me here. You might see, if I'm standing, let's say this is Renee's little avatar. She's standing here and looking straight on. You might see the inside of a room or a box that looks like a 1-point perspective. Off to the side, Renee might also see another object, say like this.
Whoa.
That looks like, see, it gets crazy. That looks like it's in 2-point perspective, or 3, I guess, because this should actually curve down. This is where you get into like fisheye and weird stuff happening. And really there is distortion in how we see things. It's just not as forced as this, because in reality you might be this small, just this little tiny thing, but I'm just forcing it to show you that yes, you can see multiple perspectives in a view, and sometimes things are rotated as well on an axis, so it can get complicated. My recommendation always, like I said yesterday, is keep it simple. Keep it simple until you're ready to understand a bit more and try seeing other things. The other thing you might realize is that there are different points of view that you might see something. Okay, so even as I scale, even as I draw another object here. Okay,
it's all about the viewer and where they're actually looking at it.
Yeah, this is like super forced again, but now we're seeing the bottom of this object. So point of view is the next thing I want to talk about. So if you're practicing and you're like, where do I start, Spencer? Should I start with 1 point, 2 point, or 3 point? I would focus on 3-point perspective. That's going to be your simplest approach to sketching most things. Without getting too far in the weeds. Sorry, just grabbing a little bit more paper here. Without getting too much in the weeds. So let's start with a 3-point perspective box. All right, so if all you can do is sketch a 3-point perspective box. Again, notice I'm rotating my paper. With each stroke. All right. Something like that. It doesn't have to be a cube, but if you want to try and draw a cube, you can do that. I forgot to show though, with 3-point perspective, 2-point, we had the face of an object facing you, the camera. 2-point, we had the edge facing you. And with 3-point, it's going to be a little bit easier to show with this guy. It's actually just the point. Notice the slight taper, on the side. So just this point is closest to the camera.
I see it.
It's really subtle, but I even have these at my desk sometimes to remind myself, okay, 1, 2, 3 point, what's happening? Because I'm kind of forgetful. But think of it that way, that you're looking at an object kind of askew. In other words, I'm at an angle to this object. Okay, you can kind of think of it that way. So here when we're drawing, it's a little bit exaggerated, but it's a good way to kind of frame things. The other thing I have here is this orange cube, and I didn't have this yesterday, but I brought it in today to show you. We talked about drawing through your object. So notice you can see these darker edges. Okay,
that's helpful.
It's helpful. So if you ever want to check and you're drawing something and you're like, this doesn't feel right, what I'm going to do is draw a line here. Okay, and kind of take a look at this angle. All right, if I draw the next line parallel, that's wrong. So I need to maybe pay attention to this line, because all these lines need to converge at the same point. Okay, so I'm going to draw through.
I definitely want to draw that back line parallel, and I'm wondering if it's just my malfunction or is that common that people?
I think it's common, right? But drawing through kind of helps you understand the structure of something. All right.
Right. Because it's not going to line up if they were parallel. You could tell right away that that's not
Yeah,
right.
you can tell. So if your lines are parallel and you're trying to draw in perspective, it's chances are it's off. I guess I could show you as well some watch outs for perspective. So if you're drawing in perspective and you draw your box and it looks something like this.
That looks like my boxes. That's how I draw them.
This is really hard for me to do. But
Here, just let me take over. It'll be easy.
If you draw something like this and you look at it, you go, that doesn't feel right. It's probably not right. Okay. Yeah. So trust your gut. You know, because we live in a three-dimensional space, we can usually tell when something's off as we're drawing in. Okay. So let's put a pin in this concept of the box. And I want to talk about real stuff. Okay. So anytime there's a real object, whether it's this camera or the cylinder, or it could even be my computer mouse on my desk, because of my weird math brain, I try to think of, okay, what's the wireframe, the invisible box around this object, and how can I break this down into some basic structure that I can then repeat or create a starting point from. So we're going to try and draw this camera. Yesterday we did a like a Palm Pilot device, super old thing, but we're going to try and draw this camera today. All right. So if you can't draw in perspective, you can always start with just a straight on front view. Okay. So we can start with the front, we can start with the top view and a side, right? There's things happening on the front, there's things happening on the top. We can identify the thickness of our camera here, right, in both dimensions. So I'm going to draw 3 shapes. So one, some rectangle like this. Okay. And I'll just use the Sharpie. So this is going to be my front view. Okay. We can label that if you want. So it's almost like we're looking at the camera this way. Now, if I look at the camera and use, again, my handy dandy finger calipers, I'm just going to guesstimate and say, and guesstimation is something I do a lot of, that this is roughly 2 squares wide. Okay.
And it's almost half, right?
It's almost half. Almost half. So if I divide this, right, and these are all equal, all right, I've got 2 squares. Interestingly enough, here's a little trick. If you draw 1 square and you divide you pick this top corner and you draw through the halfway point on that line, it should land right at the corner right there. Okay, so that's a good way of multiplying a shape, right? So again, if you can draw a square or a box, you can do a lot of things, right? Okay, so this is going to be the front of our camera, and I'm going to simplify this design for the sake of time here. We'll have a circle here and maybe just some little shape for grip and a shutter button. All right, I'm just going to simplify that. And maybe our little strap here that I'll just sketch in. Okay, so now let's extend down. By extending down, I'm making this easier for myself by saying, okay, if I want to draw the top of the camera, so it's almost like taking this and rotating it. Okay.
Right. And you just use your other drawing as the template because why not?
Exactly. You can use the other drawing. So if I need to figure out the width of the lens from the top view, might look something like that. There's the shutter button. Okay, right there. And I can draw draw a circle there. And let's just throw in a little grip there. All right. So now we've got a very, very simplified version of our camera that we're going to draw. Keep it simple. All right. So the next is we can extend over like so, draw 2 vertical lines. You know, I'm going to try and pay attention to this thickness because it would be the same from the side.
Right.
Right. So something like that. And now I get to think about, okay, I've got this little grip thing here, but notice that it doesn't extend all the way through the camera.
It doesn't, does it?
Because it stops right there. So I've extended over. Boom. Now let's figure out where the lens goes, right about there. The lens doesn't protrude too far, but I'm just going to stick it out a little bit more so I can show it in this view. All right, something like that. Yeah. And a shutter button over here. Now, this looks messy, but this is our way of understanding a real object so that we can now draw that object. Right. Okay. So I've got 3 views: front, top, and side. All right, so let's draw a square in perspective. I'm going to switch pens, actually. And yeah, let's switch pens. So I'm going to draw this square in perspective. All right, so half of the camera. And we're going to use this square to basically do everything.
Okay.
Okay. Now, again, if I take my finger calipers and go 1, 2, 3, it's about a third of the thickness of this entire square. All right. So I can use that as a general guide for figuring out my proportion for my camera. So I'm gonna take this square now and draw that in perspective. We'll start with our corner. I'm gonna start about here, draw a line down like so, and over, down, and over like so. All right. Something like that, square in perspective. Now I'm gonna figure out, how do you figure out the halfway point of this line? Well, if I just draw an X in this box, because it's just like drawing in 2D, if I just draw an X like so, this point should be
the midpoint. You know that if you cut wood, like that's how you find the middle.
Yeah. Do you build furniture too?
Oh, no, it's just that's the only thing I know about it is that's how you find the middle. So it's crazy. Of course it works in perspective.
Yeah, so it works in perspective too. So I can take this point now and just extend over. And now I have a point on this line that should be representative of half and half. This is going to get a little bit messy, but meant to be instructive for all of you. All right. So now I'm going to take this bottom line and just extend it out. Right. And if I rotate my paper and now shoot, this is where all those warm-up exercises come in handy, right? And again, I'm still drawing with my shoulder.
Right.
Look at how I'm holding my pen so I can see where I'm going. All right. Ghost, all the stuff we did when warming up. And there is my proportion for my camera.
Can you show it on the front again? Because you've got that big triangle on the front view. That's how you knew you could translate it. Yeah. Well, on the camera,
on this one.
Actually.
Yeah. So think of it like I drew an X over, found the halfway point, and then extended that out. Okay. And that gives you the overall proportion.
Right.
Okay. So we can draw, if you wanted to, you could draw a square going the opposite direction. Now, notice what happens. So if these two are equal, okay, and I'm looking at, say, this box, notice what happens when I see more of this face. Right.
It kind of gets shorter.
We'll call, instead of saying this face, we'll call this A, and we'll call this B.
That's a Sharpie, no.
It is a Sharpie. It's all good. All right, so face A, look at what happens when I rotate. Okay, these are the same size. This is a cube. These are the same size. So as I rotate this, I'm seeing less of the B side and more of the A side. Okay, so even though these two are equal and square, I'm seeing less of this far side. More of this front side. Okay, now I know there's a way to figure out thirds in perspective, but I'm just going to guesstimate it. If this is about half, this is about a third for me. So
we've had enough math today. So
yeah, I'm going to draw up like so. And now just continue in perspective like so.
Nice.
All right. Again, slight taper, right? This distance here being a bit wider than the distance off to the back.
Right. Don't be me. Don't do parallel lines.
Exactly. All right. So now I can just extend through like so. All right. We're going to draw our grip. Okay. And if you need to check back to your drawing, just check back. You know, this is about halfway to the square right here. So I'm drawing the grip. I'm going to stop just short of the halfway point, right about there. Right.
I think most people wouldn't expect that you could use your own drawings as a pattern for the other drawings you're about to do. And that's just so cool.
You can absolutely do that. Okay. Ellipses are really tricky in perspective.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
And let's just dive right in and show you.
Okay. I'm ready. Let's do this.
Okay. So remember that warm-up exercise we did earlier? Where we drew the square and the circle. So I'm going to draw a square up. There's a square. And let's say I did this circle accurately. It's going to touch at 4 points. All right. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, if I divide this square thusly, right, vertically and horizontally, and then corner to corner, like so,
right,
I'm able to pick up on some interesting things. I have 4 points, again, where the circle is tangent to the square or the box. And now on the diagonals, we have intersection points that are roughly, just think of it this way, a third. It's not exactly a third, but if you just tell yourself that, it's close enough. Close enough is good enough when we're drawing these concepts. All right, so I could take this square
Mm-hmm.
And if I can draw a square in perspective, right? Remember, a little bit wider here, right? Taper, all that stuff. Divide it just like we did, just like so. I can now find those points. I know I'm going to touch on these 4 corners, and about a third of the way in.
Wow. Okay. I'm seeing it.
Okay, about a third of the way in. I'll draw real slow here. All right. We're going to be able to get our ellipse. So depending on the angle you're viewing your square. So this is another way of thinking about this relationship I showed you earlier. Okay, there is a square around, I guess this one's a little too small, but there is a square around this circle. Okay, and as I move this cylinder, I'm essentially changing the perspective.
Yeah. So if that's tighter, then it's going to be a tighter ellipse.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be a little bit tighter. So I'd end up with something like this. All right. See how that works? So the angle you view that square or that surface changes how you see your ellipse. What does that have to do with our camera? Well, 2 things. We have a button on top, and I'm just going to keep that real simple. So let's draw a square there. All right. We can do our little magic trick like so. Boom, boom, boom. I know I'm going to be tangent here, third of the way in.
Yep.
All right, so that's roughly what my ellipse would look like. Same thing here on the front. Okay, I'm going to extend the grip over like so. And get our square in, something like that. And if I divide this, I should end up with those points.
Wow. And then you've got it perfectly in perspective, so then in the same spot.
You get an accurate, yep, exactly. If you wanted to do this is kind of like drawing with training wheels, and that's okay. But if you wanted to, you could extend this out, draw another square.
Oh, and then that's the depth of the camera lens.
That's the depth of the camera lens.
That's great.
Something like that. And I won't do all the lines, but that's going to be the depth of your camera lens. Okay.
Now we do have a question about isometric views, and they're asking, is that using parallel lines? Is that what I'm doing when I'm messing it up?
Yes, isometric views are done using parallel lines. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. That's what that is. Parallel lines at, I believe, 30 or 60 degrees. No, 30 degrees off the horizontal. So
you're the mathematician. You tell us.
Yeah. Well, also took technical drawing. But yes, that is how you would figure out how to draw the camera. This ellipse feels a little bit off, but almost like I need to rotate it. But here, if we if we wanted to round the end of the camera, for example, I could draw an ellipse. And if I had an ellipse on the bottom and just connected those, that would give me the overall shape. Okay, so this looks super messy, but here's the power of line weight. So line weight's another thing that I use to help bring out information or details. So there's 2 ways to go about this. One, we could do an overlay, and maybe I'll show you both ways. So the first way is to just take a heavier marker like your Sharpie here, and I can just go around the outline of my rough sketch and basically just pull out whatever details I want to have.
Nice.
Right.
And they're starting to get stronger. You know, my eyes are paying more attention to those thicker lines because of the weight.
Exactly. Our brains are funny how they work that way, where when you do see that heavier line, we kind of focus on that information as opposed to the construction lines that are there. Okay. So there we go, just like that.
Mohammed says you said it looks like a mess, but that it looks really clean if they were the one doing it.
All right.
It's beautiful.
Maybe a little shading in there. Oh,
it's the same for me. Like this would be like, look how crisp and beautiful this is.
All right. So that's one way to do it. Steven says he's having flashbacks to being tormented by technical drawing.
I'm not trying to torment you here, Steven. We're just trying to get you excited about drawing. And I wonder, watching you do this in pen and paper, you've got to tell us whether or not it's any different when you get to the iPad. Like, talk to people if there's any
Oh,
difference.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. There's some interesting things we can do too with digital sketching that you can't necessarily do on paper. So the other way to do it, and you can kind of see here, this is a special paper called marker paper.
Right.
You don't have to have marker paper. If you have tracing paper, that's fine too. But it's a little bit more translucent. So what I can essentially do, and if I want to move quickly and start sketching other concepts, I'll show you. We'll sketch 2 camera concepts here. So let's say I wanted to make some changes and maybe curve this line. I can use the sketch on the bottom essentially as a guide.
Right. And, you know, I think some people might think that this, you know, tracing is bad is a thing people say, especially when you're kids. But like, this is totally legit. This is what you do when you're an industrial designer. You trace your own stuff all the time.
Well, I call it redrawing. The reason for that is I'm using the under sketch loosely as a guide and not holding myself too tightly to it. Okay.
Right. You're making changes.
Making some changes. Maybe I want to move the lens position. I could slightly move here and do my ellipses. Now I have a new lens position. All right. So maybe this is one concept.
Right.
And I'll show you some cool things we can do with marker here as well. So I'm going to kind of keep this a little bit lighter.
Mm-hmm. I see, you know, while you're drawing, I see how you're far back on the pen and you're drawn from your shoulder. I can kind of tell. It's making me nervous because I'm always up on my pen like this, but I can see how, you know, it lets you be looser. Like I physically see it in your mind.
That's actually a great word and one I use quite often. It helps you be loose. You know, oftentimes if you're stressed, your drawing is going to look frantic, but if you're relaxed and just having fun, it makes it, your drawing will feel a lot better. Okay. So even as my under sketch here, I had straight lines. I can come in and let's say I want to curve the profile of the camera. We can do that. Right.
Nice.
And we're essentially maintaining the perspective again. Yeah. These lines appearing to converge like so. And these corners is how I think about it, appearing to converge as well. And let's do a different grip, perhaps. Have an ellipse there. Bring this in like so. And how about we put the shutter on this?
Oh yeah, out on the grip part. That's cool.
Yeah, it's a pretty common feature, but let's say we do that and we can maintain the lens in the same spot. So this is a way you can move kind of quickly as you're drawing, right? I did one sketch to start, figured out all the perspective, and maybe I want to show some options and say, here's some different ideas or different configurations. Maybe there's a flash on this one, for example. All right, so I've got 2 sketches now that we were able to do really quickly. And now I can just take my Sharpie, hit the bottom here. We don't even have to outline the whole thing, just maybe the bottom, like so. It just gives a little bit of presence on the page. Same thing on this side, a little bit like so. Yeah. And over.
Clever in the chat says that the only thing they learned from drafting class was how to write good handwriting.
I mean, I definitely learned that too. And I won't get into the weeds on that, but good handwriting is important too if you're doing product design sketching, for sure.
Well, all the industrial designers have that look to their handwriting, and I didn't know. You learn it in school. That's why.
You do learn it. Essentially, it's drawing your letters. So instead of just writing A, B, you know, it's drawing your letters.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so crazy.
Something like that. So just a little bit of practice there. Okay, so I want to show you something you can do. If you have a local art store, you can just pick up a marker like this. This is just a cheap art marker. Or if you want to get fancy, you can use Copic markers as well. Those are the super fancy, expensive ones that I have. But a marker is a good way as well. Let me put some paper behind this so it doesn't look so washed. This looks so weird. Marker is a good way of showing differences in materials or colors on your concept. So maybe you want to highlight the button. You can do something like that. Or think about it this way. If you look at my cube here, again, notice that side B, here's side B. Side B is a lot darker than side A. That's also helping to communicate the depth.
Right.
also helping. So value or shade is one way to help reinforce perspective. So I could take a quick marker, or if you just have a pencil, that's okay too, or a pen. But this is one way to show that something is on top of something else. A little bit of a shadow, right? So notice there, helps it feel more 3D. Okay, just on the side, like so. All right, we can do something like that.
Nice. It really does add, just the littlest bit of shading has added so much.
Yeah, just a little bit. Super quick, simple, easy concepts, not getting too much in the weeds. And there are other creative things you can do. So if you want to show some texture, right, we can just kind of tap the paper here. Maybe that's a little bit of a grip idea.
Right, like a pebble.
Yeah, or it might be just drawing parallel lines on the paper. That's another way to create the perception of texture. You can do a lot of things with lines. I'm more of a line illustrator, artist, designer, if you will, than I am a painter. I love painting. It's fun, but I'm more of a line artist for sure.
I find lines tedious, and I think it's because of that whole, being up on the pen problem that I seem to have.
Yeah, I can see that. Even here, I'm backed pretty far off.
Yeah.
Right. And I find that helps me actually draw straighter lines as well. So now we've changed the look of that. We've got two concepts, and pretty common, typical thing we do in product design. We'll throw a little square or something behind to communicate a background. All right. So we've done a 2D to 3D kind of workflow here. I'm going to show you some other tips and tricks to help give depth in your drawing, even if you're just drawing in 2D, for example. So remember I mentioned in perspective, scale is one way to show position relatively. So here's an example of two boxes. And as you're communicating, some inferences can be made that this box in front, is in front because it is bigger. Okay, so that's one, scale. The next is relative position. So if I have a square here and one here, okay, really there's a horizon line, if you will, okay, and there are vanishing lines to all this. So just by how you draw something in 2D can often communicate position. The other way to think about it too is if I have a shape here and a shape here. Normally I would play the game, guess what the teacher's thinking, but absent a few additional details, it's hard to tell what's happening here. Okay, if I rotate my view and look at this, it could be that I have a shape, something like this, in front of another shape. Right, like this. It could also mean that I have a box in 3D and another box in another position, but it's hard to actually tell. Right. Because it could be these two things. So does that make sense? If I'm looking this way and this just happens to line up, right? That's so that tricky. It looks like that view. So it's a little bit tricky. So there are a couple ways to do this. One is just make this line a little bit heavier on the bottom. And now we have a shadow. So it feels like, oh, this is actually protruding out. Okay. Right. Just a simple way to show depth and scale on the outline here as well. We can add a little bit of a heavier line. And depending on where you put your heavy line, it also can sometimes be shorthand for, hey, I've got light coming from one side of this scene because I have a lighter line here, heavier line, and now a darker line right there. And our brains put it together. Our brains say, oh, that's where it converges. Absolutely. And if this is extending pretty far out, so if the shape actually were extending out and overhanging, or secondary shape B, you would see a shadow. So if I now change this to shading something like that, I'm now showing that, oh, there's an overhang. So even if you sketch in 2D, there are some ways and tricks that you can use to add depth. So even if you're just comfortable drawing a 2D shape, right, you can draw stuff, right? You can communicate things. How is this different in digital art, or is it different? Because, I feel like that's kind of what
people might be asking themselves? Like, okay, I get this, it's pen and paper, but like digital art is different, right? Or is it?
It's not totally different.
It's not?
It's the same to me as using a crayon as opposed to a pen. You know,
Okay.
it's more about, and we'll switch over here to
Okay.
the iPad, but it's more about how you use your tool than necessarily what you're using. Okay.
All
So
right.
I've got Adobe Fresco open here. Adobe Fresco, if you haven't gotten into it yet, is Adobe's awesome drawing app. When you open the app, you're presented with a view like this. I've created some stuff. I've got some work that I've created and done before, but we're gonna jump in and definitely check out yesterday's stream if you want to see some more of my work examples. But let's jump into this tabloid document here. So we'll continue on this thread of drawing. Really, it's kind of the same or similar. I've got my Apple Pencil here that I'm using with my iPad Pro. And once I hit new document, we have a blank canvas. And Adobe Fresco comes chock full of awesome brushes that you can use to just start drawing. In fact,
I'm going to interrupt you. Sorry, didn't
right.
see. Because somebody in the chat earlier was asking about the different brushes. So do you mind talking about that first? They wanted to know, like, why would I use the different 3 brushes?
Oh, okay. In the ones I used yesterday, or just
no, in Fresco, because they're saying, you know, there's 3 different options in Fresco.
The vector, the live, and the pixel. Okay, so pixel brushes are, just as the name implied, you're painting with pixels or drawing with pixels. The default brush is the pencil, so I can shade like a real pencil on paper.
Ooh.
Or if I tip my pencil more vertical, I get a nice crisp line. Okay.
Nice.
So this is a great one, just as general all-purpose drawing tool. Couple things I do want to mention. I think the Adobe Max session should still be up, but I have an Adobe Max session that goes over all of the interface in exquisite detail, including a workbook that you have that has tons of information for you as a reference. So if you get lost or you feel confused, you definitely check that out, because that resource is there for you. So pixel brush, the way I like to think of pixels is kind of like a light bright. Do you remember those?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, so it's like turning little elements on your screen on or off. And if we zoom in, you can kind of see there are the pixels. All right. Some of the pixels are brighter and some are lighter. All right. Then I'm going to jump to the vector brush. So vector essentially is a mathematical equation that says it is what it is. That's the way I like to think of it. Okay. So what I mean is, I've switched to vector brushes. That's going to be your 3rd option down. If you tap, there are options for each brush. I'm going to use the basic taper brush here. All right. And pro tip, well, not really a pro tip, but tip. If you want to undo in Fresco, 2-finger tap on the screen gives you an undo. 3-finger tap gives you a redo. So if you want to, there are icons at the top of the screen or buttons that you can use to undo and redo, but I find it easier to just use the gesture, 2-finger tap on the screen to undo. So let's just make a squiggle like we did before, and we'll zoom in and look at this. All right, so notice there's my vector squiggle. So now when I zoom in, okay, if we compare, I'm seeing all the light brights on the pixel brush, but on the vector brush, there are no light brights. No matter how much I zoom in, it's crisp, right?
Wow.
Super, super crisp. So there are times where if you're working on something and you want to, say, scale it up to, you know, print on a billboard or just a huge poster, you might want to do your lines in vector. And it's kind of a strategic decision depending on how you're working. But there are instances where I have done that. Right.
Yeah. So you want that freedom. You're like, I don't know how big this is going to be. And then you made the choice to use vectors. Yeah,
absolutely. The other thing to point out in Fresco is that each of these brushes has their own layer type. So this is on a vector layer. So I can actually turn this off. And this just happens by default. So if I go back to my pixel layer, which is the middle icon on the right, and start drawing, it's going to jump to that vector layer and say, oh, you're trying to do a vector. That's where you want to put it. If I don't have a vector layer, it will automatically create a vector layer for me.
Cool.
The next is live brushes. And these are some of my favorite parts of Fresco, actually. Like I mentioned, I love painting. I'm not great at it, but I love it. And Fresco's brush engine has live brushes. So we have 2 options, watercolor and oil. And I don't know the technical pinnings of these. I just know they work really well. Let's pick a color here so we can kind of see. So for example,
I know a little bit. A little bit. So there were literally research scientists in the basement of Adobe San Jose using real paints and then trying to translate that to a mathematical equation. So it's not just texture. You think it's texture, but it's not just texture. It's also color.
Yeah, and I've noticed it's almost like you're pushing the paint around like you would with oil paint. So
there's
that's it's interesting, and that is a factor of pressure as well. So there's pressure, there's mix and flow and different settings you can adjust if you really want to get into it. You can do that. My favorite live brushes, though, I'm a little biased, I love the watercolor, and check this out. So the oil live brushes just work on a regular pixel layer, but the watercolor live brushes will create a new layer. So I'm going to let's start with the soft wash. So there we go. And notice how, the color just really flows, right?
Yeah, and if you get like a red, it'll turn into a deeper orange instead of just going right on top, which is amazing.
So now, yeah, there you go.
So pretty.
You can see that just flow. And you can tap on the layer and hit dry. And it's almost like drying real watercolor paint, so that now when I apply the color, I'm getting a little bit different response. Okay. It's pretty cool. You can adjust how much water is flowing as well. So if this is something you enjoy, if you want tons of water and low pigment, for example, we can do that too. All right. So super, super fun to play with and use. It'll also affect other things on the canvas, which can be interesting, but certainly a creative exercise for you. All right. So back to so hopefully that answers your question on the brushes, different types of brushes. For me, it just depends on what I'm drawing and, you know, how I envision using the piece. If it's typically, if it's a product design sketch, I'll actually sometimes use the watercolor live brushes to color something. Or if it's like an illustration or something, I might use the oil brushes, for example, instead.
Thank you for showing that.
Digital sketching isn't that different from drawing on paper. Again, it's all about technique. Even, you know, as I switch to the overhead here, just to show you how I'm holding, my stylus, I'm holding it about halfway up. Okay.
Wow.
So even as I'm drawing, I tend to hold things that way. We can switch back now.
Me, I'm all up on it. I'm like, and I only noticed afterwards. I'll be drawing for like an hour and I'm like, wow, that's a death grip.
Does your hand hurt after you're holding
what is
things?
Wrong with me?
Okay. Yeah, I think for me it actually helps me just not have any hand strain as well when I'm just more relaxed. Okay, so I showed you some perspective stuff. We did the box, showed you some 2D stuff. I want to show you a really cool trick as well that we can do.
Cool.
So let's say you just know the shape of something, right? Might be, let's say we want to do some computer mice or something, but I'll show you a basic idea here. I'm actually going to switch to my own brushes. You can make your own brushes as well that sync through Adobe Creative Cloud. And
your brushes are on your website.
They are sketchaday.com. Yep.
Sketchaday.com.
That's right. Okay. So let's say I just have a shape like so, all right? And maybe another one like so. And we'll do another one like this. Okay. Cool. And right now they're just shapes on the page. They're not, or the canvas. They're not three-dimensional by any means, but I can make them seem three-dimensional. Okay. So now I have a nice heavy clean outline. Another option you can adjust in your brushes, by the way, if you have a shaky hand and you want to help yourself have better lines, you can drag the smoothing up and this will help you get a nice smooth line when you draw. So just a little tip there, Adobe Fresco will actually help you draw better too. All right, so there's
you have to set that for each brush, I think. So every brush is different.
Yeah, every brush is different, but you can adjust that. And just by way of information, you can also adjust your pressure sensitivity in the app. So if you go into your app settings, input, adjust stylus pressure. If you have a heavy hand like I do, right, you can adjust that so that it takes more. to draw, but I'll just
Nice.
go back to where it was. It's just fine. All right, so you can adjust the app. Again, it's a lot like rotating the paper to the angle that works best for you, right? It's a similar concept. Make the app fit how you draw as opposed to trying to constrain and force yourself into something that's uncomfortable. All right, so I've got some shapes here on the page. And now if I use my laser eyes, not real laser eyes, I have superpowers, but that's not one of them.
I definitely don't have laser eyes, but I'd like to hear about your laser eyes.
What I'm going to do is imagine that I'm cutting through the shape, and I get to, as the creator, the artist, the designer, I get to decide what this thing is. So in this instance, maybe I have a shape like this. Okay. And I could go up like so, down and back up and around. Okay. So notice how that now feels like it's almost like something's pushing down into the shape, right?
Yeah.
Here's another example. Instead of rounding the edge like that, we could just start flat and go up, down, and then start this way. Actually, we'll go up like this and then down. So now it looks like, hey, something from underneath is kind of pushing up on this shape. Okay. Here's another example. We could just go across and then just like so. All right. So we've given three-dimensional presence to these shapes without having to actually construct the box. So if all you can do is, Louis says, more blood cells. Absolutely. They're kind of like blood cells, but there are some basically just easy and simple ways you can use to communicate depth, right? So let's apply that to something real and just see what we come up with. So like I mentioned, maybe I want to sketch computer mice today or something. Okay. So
I've banned mice though. I can't be trusted, as you know. I've already talked about my RSI problems because I have bad wrist. So like I can't use the mouse at all. Like I don't.
If all you can do, all right, is remember this this concept. When in doubt, rough it out, lie till you get it right. You know, reduce the stress, the tension, the anxiety you have as you're going into drawing. That's going to help you a ton. So let's say, you know, all you can do is sketch real rough, like so. Right. This
That's me. How did you know?
This is how you draw something. It's like, yes, okay, I can only draw short lines. All right, that's cool. You know, don't let that stop you. All right, just rough it out. So this is an example of just roughing something out. Okay. Cool thing is in Fresco now, I can tap on my layer options, drop my opacity, which is essentially working light till you get it right.
Yeah.
So we've roughed it out, we've lowered the opacity, and now I can go a little bit slower. And so. Nice. And again, if we want, we can turn up our smoothing. Okay.
Oh, that looks nice.
So now Fresco is going to help me out a little bit. All right, so maybe I have one shape like that. And here's my other shape. That
looks like a magic mouse. I remember those.
Oh yeah, those were interesting. And let's just finish out this shape. Some sort of egg shape. Okay.
It's a good egg. It's almost Easter.
I'm gonna turn the, oh yeah, it is almost Easter. Time doesn't really exist in the pandemic, so.
No, it's true. It's been March for a whole year.
I didn't even remember it was St. Patrick's Day yesterday. So.
Oh yeah, no.
All right. So now I can start to divide this up. So maybe I draw a line here. And we can draw our cross contour. And the cool thing is, like at this point, we get to decide some stuff. I could draw a line like this. I could draw a line like this. I could draw it out. And each of these lines is going to communicate a different type of surface, right? Or shape. So if all you can do is draw these cross contours, that's a great way of quickly showing a concept. And then we'll add some shading to this as well. And here we drew our whole shape, but I'm just going to go ahead and erase. So in Fresco, you do have erasers. There's options for the eraser brushes as well. Now I'm just going to change this profile ever so slightly.
Get a little sharp edge there, huh?
Yeah, maybe change my design there.
Nice.
I have another line that comes through here. And maybe this comes through the front or something. Whatever you imagine or want to show. Okay, so now I can do the same thing. So a little bit of cross contour there, and I'm just going to continue that down the center like so. May want to add something like a wheel on your mouse. So one way to do this is you could imagine, okay, what?
A box.
And again, there is perspective to all this. So it may not look like, hey, Spencer, you're not really sketching in perspective, but I think of the bottom of the mouse like, okay, there's two ellipses, and these ellipses are bound and connected like so. All right, there's a plane. I'll switch my color here so you can see a little bit better. There's a plane, meaning just a flat rectangular box like so.
But that's all happening in your mind.
This is all happening in my head. Absolutely.
Totally.
Absolutely. Right. Maybe this box is angled, you could say.
Yeah.
Something like that. But that's kind of how I'm thinking about the shape overall. So I may not draw all of this, but that is quite literally what I'm envisioning as far as proportion and such. That's important because as you go to draw something like, say, a mouse wheel, if your mouse has a wheel, you can kind of imagine, okay, there's a center, there's going to be a pivot to the wheel. And if I were to draw a box again in perspective here, it's going to be a little bit funky because this is going at an angle, right? I can do my little trick here.
Right.
Draw my ellipse, draw my other ellipse, right? And if you want to use this as a guide, we can just drop the opacity. And now on a new layer or the layer we're working on, let's see. I always play layer roulette. Do you do that?
Yes, okay. I always do that. When you watch my time lapses, that's what you're seeing is like, me not knowing which layer I'm doing. So everything flickers because I'm trying to figure out what layer I'm on.
Yeah, so now I can use this very light red sketch here as a little bit of an underlay essentially. Right.
That's genius because it looks like I see it in my brain recognizes that looks realistic. So
yeah, so that's the box that I would use to kind of show things, right? And if I want to show that, oh, maybe there's actually this is actually a button, right? We're gonna have to have some thickness to this. So I'll just take this line. Yeah. There's two ways to go about this. One is I could actually just make a selection. Oops. Make a selection here. If I don't want to draw this line twice, I could just make a selection like so.
And just copy the line. You know, Robzilla loves to do that.
Just tap on the line and hit duplicate selection. And now I'll just move it down like so, hit done. Nice. And that's on its own layer. So I can erase.
Right.
And then if I want to change the thickness somewhere or perhaps, let's see, how would I finish this off? I got to think for a minute.
Yeah, Laura says you make it look easy, and I have to agree. You do make it look really easy.
So maybe, thank you. Maybe I'll extend that up and then down like so.
It's pretty sweet.
Right, so just thinking about my design, I'm probably going to change this line a little bit. I'll smooth it out, and then I'll show you how to add some stuff in Fresco that'll make it better, even better, look cooler, I should say. All right, so maybe I want to change this line. I'll just go ahead and erase what I did here, just to about that point, and drawing with my shoulder, just kind of correct that line a little bit. It was just a little bit too wonky for me.
I like that dip. I don't know. There's just something really interesting about it at the back. Right. The way it sort of curves in. That's cool. Right here. Yeah, I guess that's where the thumb goes, right? You're thinking about how someone holds it, and that's why you put that.
I'm thinking, if I were to draw a line on the surface, and these are all like things I think about. If I were drawing a line on the surface, this is almost kind of changing direction there. And we've got these cross sections right through here. So as I shade this, if a surface is facing up, it's going to catch some light, and you'll see what I mean in just a sec. So there's some quick ways we can shade this. So we have contour lines to help us communicate the 3D nature of the thing. The next thing I want to do is on a new layer, is just add some shading. So in terms of how I arrange things, I tend to kind of have a base color. And we started on that yesterday. We didn't really get to finish. So I'll show you what I mean here a little bit. So I'm just going to pick a nice little bluish gray here. And I like to work on separate layers just in case I need to change something. As a designer, if you're working with a client, or if you change your mind a lot, you might want to have some flexibility in how you do things. So that's the way I like to think about it.
How many do you have? Do you like do every color on a new layer, or the shading on a new layer?
That's a great question. If there is a material change in the thing I'm drawing, or a significant color change or area, I tend to create a new layer. So yes. The way I like to think about it, I'll just draw this real quick, is, let's see, let's go back to my black. Pro tip as well, in Fresco, it keeps track of the colors you pick. So if you picked a black or special color and you're dreading switching colors, you can check the history of your color picking below, and it'll just be right there under recents. Okay. So in terms of the structure of my drawing, it's kind of like this. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Look at these beautiful layers in perspective. You're even drawing your example in perspective. Spencer.
That one's off, but don't judge me for that one.
Never.
Okay. So on the very top, I kind of have effects, is what I call it. This is going to be my sketch layer. So this would be my actual lines. I think smoothing's on. That's why it looks weird. Yeah. I was like, why does my writing look so weird? That's my sketch. And then I'm going to have highlights and tone here. And on this layer is going to be my solids.
Nice.
Okay. And when I say layer, I really mean layers. Right? So these are all groupings of highlights and tones. It's usually one sketch layer or two, maybe. And then I have like maybe 2 effect layers. So you can kind of think of it that way in terms of how I organize my sketch. All right.
I want a sandwich now, I think.
Okay. I'll leave that up so you'll kind of see what I mean here.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to make a new layer again for my color. Back here, we've got our blue. And another thing in Fresco, notice that my fine liner brush that I made has a star next to it. That means that I've made it a favorite. So if I jump to favorites, there's my fine liner. And I have a bunch of other favorites. These are brushes that I use quite a bit. So I can jump to my hard round brush, and I'll show you why. This is what I use when I want to outline an area. Okay. If you want to adjust the brush size, there's these little numbers on the lower left side of your screen. You can tap and scale up like so if you want, or just click or tap and drag up and down. Right. So using this brush, though, I'm just going to create a nice little outline along the perimeter of where I think I'm going to have some material difference. Okay, so maybe something like this.
Looks good.
And now I can use the paint bucket tool, just tap, fill that area in. There is a little bit of a perimeter thing that happens when you use a pixel brush. So I'm just going to go around and clean that up.
And they're working on improvements. I hear you out there saying, like, why doesn't that feel a little bit better?
Oh, okay.
The team's working on it.
I wasn't going to say anything, Renee.
No. But it's okay. A critique is fair. So we're doing our very best. And we're trying to give you some advancements for that tool. So stay tuned.
All right. So now we have a nice solid color, but it's flat, right? And that's okay. And I'm going to pick a gray now. Let's see. Should I pick a gray? Maybe a light gray. Let's do a light gray. And notice that the blue layer is on top. So I don't have to worry about, right? So as I'm painting, you see that the gray shows through, but under here, because I was careful with that gray, I can just be a little bit more free to save time.
You don't have to worry about coloring in the lines. You're coloring under the line.
Yeah, I don't have to worry too much, right? And since this is a small area, I'll just fill it in by hand. You can also do that as well. And erase to clean up. And for the mouse wheel itself, I'm going to change the material here.
While you're filling that in, I'm going to let the people know that we're going to do a artist spotlight in about 5 minutes here, a little bit more, about 6 minutes. And, you know, on behance.com, we've got all sorts of amazing artists. And what we like to do is just show a little bit from somebody randomly. So just letting you know, 5 minutes or so, we're going to get into that.
Ooh.
And we're going to talk about their art and just take a look. It's a nice little thing, fun community activity.
Awesome. So there's my solid layers, right? So the first step of solids, next is highlights and tones, and again my sketch layers on top. So there's my kind of structure, my secret sauce to how I work quickly. So above my colors, I'm going to make a new layer, and now I'm going to switch my brush, and let's go back to my, I have options here. I have a nice little marker brush that I like to use from time to time. So it just depends on the nature of the sketch or the effect I'm trying to go for. All right, a little test there. So again, if this surface is, let's see, this contour line is bugging me a little bit, so I'm going to change that.
I do that too.
No,
like,
I'm not going to change it. I'm not going to change it after all. No,
okay.
I'm not going to change it. Okay.
Hey, you do what you need.
I figured it out. Okay. So right at this line where it recedes, notice that as I start to tone this in, right, it's reinforcing that 3D contour line that we had sketched, okay, just by having that in place. Now I take a soft eraser, make sure it's nice and big, and we can kind of feather in that shadow just a little bit. So even that little bit there is now communicating some three-dimensionality. So on a new layer, and so a lot of these effects I put on individual layers. So now I'm gonna switch to, let's see, I have an air highlighter here I'm going to use, and lighting is something we could talk about for 3 hours easily, but I'm just going to take a little highlighter brush, and I'm going to do two things. I'm going to go dark and then also light. So here, right on the top, we'll do like a little, okay, that came in a little bit weird. Let me switch to the soft air highlighter. Oh, perfect. Okay, so right down the middle, like so. Just gonna kind of tone this mouse.
That's great. It already is popping out on the screen.
And if something's too intense, you can always take the layer and just adjust down a little bit. All right. So new layer, and next to that dark spot, I'm gonna switch to a nice bright color, like a bright, really bright blue, but also desaturated. And we can zoom in and just hit the far side.
Ooh, that looks nice.
All right, so that's called a secondary light source, if you want to get technical about it. And now on top, we'll take, let's go to the soft round opacity brush. I'm gonna make this big, and let's see, how big is it? Okay, it's a little bit too big, so 2,000 pixels.
The soft round opacity also, by the way, if you're looking for an airbrush and you don't find something named airbrush, this is the one you want. I know it's not named it, but this is what you're looking for.
It's not named it, but that's what you're looking for, absolutely. So even if you paint something and you're like, oh man, I painted that and it's too big, you can actually take the transform tool and kind of squish and rotate, manipulate things to where you want them to be, just like that. And so I'm just building these layers, right? And playing with, let's see, is this the marker? And playing with just layering stuff to get the effect that I want. You can also play with layer blending modes if you want. So for example, if I jump to color dodge, okay, and start painting on top, get a lot brighter effect, and then I can jump in with my eraser and just fade this a little bit. So it's almost like a nice little highlight area on this mouse. Okay, just
that there's like a light that you can see in the reflection.
Yeah, just a little light there. So now on the front, to help this feel like it's rounding, right here, oops, wrong layer. I'm gonna jump to a nice dark color here, and we can kind of marker that in. Actually, here's another little trick. If you've painted something on the screen, so say my other light shadow here, and I want to bring that in as a color, I can just tap on the screen and we have this little color picker. So let's say, oh man, this gray worked really well, I'm going to use that. So just release, and now I have that gray selected.
Nice.
And right here, I can use this marker brush.
So you can match that gray, and then it'll show up in your recent colors as a new chip, right?
Absolutely. So if I go to colors, there it is. There's a couple grays there because I was kind of messing around, fooling around, but it's right there. All right, make that a little smaller. I'm going to go a little bit darker here as we have this little underhang.
It's reminding me of the camera where like you just did the most simplest things and it immediately popped right off the page.
And there's a lot more we could do. I'm just trying to keep this very, very simple for everyone, right? So think of base color and then do your highlights and shadows. All right. And then if you need to add some sort of effect, you can do that on top just fine.
Those little wheels. Remember when they had like clickies? Click, 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 click.
Oh, on the wheels. I actually like wheels that click more.
Yeah.
I think I'm just old school when it comes to my computer device. Okay. So let's say we want to add some texture to the mouse, right? Whether it's material or whatever. We have a ton of options actually. And since the question was asked earlier about the watercolor, specifically, we have a watercolor wet spatter brush that I can use. And I can actually, let's scale this up a little bit.
Hang on, we might do that after the artist spotlight because we're just about up to it. And so we can leave them hanging.
All right, we'll leave you hanging.
Yeah. So hang on that. And I think we're ready to get started on this artist spotlight. So let me go ahead and open up my page and make sure I'm all ready. Let's get this. All righty. And so again, behance.com is an amazing place where you can find incredible artists like Elisandra Lopes. Now, I'm so sorry if I said your name wrong. I did my very best. Please go check out her work. Give her a follow because she's a really charming illustrator. So let's check out her stuff here, Spencer. I'll just scroll through, and if you see something you want to take a bigger peek at, let me know. Ooh.
Awesome. I like these the line. Like, you know, like I said, I'm a line artist, so I'm looking at all the lines, and I love just the funky flow of that brain with the pencil, actually.
Oh, yeah. Here,
this is cool, too, though.
Let's go back to the brain, though, because it's really funny.
Yeah, super simple. Really interesting.
Yeah. I love the shoe. Seeing the bottom of the shoe is really charming. And I love the colors because the pink actually works really well with the teal.
It does work well.
That's adorable. Here, let me go back to the llama. I want to take a peek at the llama. Sorry, I thought it was really cute. I love the flowers.
It is really cute. I actually enjoy sketching flowers myself quite a bit. So these are really great. Yeah.
Well, these are like lilies, right?
I'm not sure of the type of flower. I'm terrible with names.
Me too. I'm so bad with flower names. I don't even know any of them. There's so many animals. That's really cute. A little charming doggy.
Ooh, let's look at those doodles.
Yeah, which one?
Is that a raccoon?
Yes, this one's got a raccoon. I think they both have raccoons. It's Raccoon Drawings Part 1.
Okay.
And we've got mushrooms. Raccoon.
I could totally see these being like some cool repeat pattern, like almost like a wallpaper or wrapping paper, something like that. Could be really
totally cool. And you know, not to do a feature plug, but Fresco has a pattern maker they just launched. So you could take these into Fresco and you could automatically make like a cute pattern. These would look so good.
I've got to update my Fresco then, because that sounds amazing.
Yeah, it is pretty cool. She really likes animals. I love this. I love the animals. Just having a good time in the holidays. Here, I wanted to check out these raccoons too, because this was Raccoon Part 2, and we're really loving it. And we got some text here. Oh, sparkly wanders give powers. Foresty and cute and just really adorable. Some raccoon sketches from my personal children's book. This is awesome. Well, Elisandra, your stuff is great. Thank you so much for being a part of Behance. Everybody out there in the chat, give her a follow and give her some big ups for her adorable animal drawings. Really wonderful. All righty. Now, I think we're almost ready to see what you were about to do with that watercolor.
All right.
Yeah. Switch on back because I'm excited. I want to know how you use it because I've got my own ideas, but you take everything to a unique place. So I'm really excited to see what that's going to look like.
Well, you mentioned, the pattern maker in Fresco. Speaking of new features in Fresco, there's also collaboration. So I actually just sent you a link, Renee. to this document. So if you want to
Okay.
comment on stuff while I'm working,
Oh, okay, okay, okay.
everyone can kind of see what happens. So
Yeah,
I'm going to
let me
jump
do that.
back to this watercolor here and pick a nice blue. That's really cool that Adobe Live does the artist feature, by the way, spotlights. That's
Great?
such a great opportunity. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so nice to share what other people are doing and just be a part of, encouraging each other. It's part of being an artist to, I don't know, have a community and be there and get people excited about drawing and following each other. It's just part of it.
So with any product, really, what I'm trying to communicate is what the product looks like, how it might be used. It might be the context of the product or additional details. So here's an example of, maybe I want to add some texture to this top case, if you will, of the mouse, this top surface. So just using this watercolor spatter brush in a similar color, it's on a new layer. I can kind of paint in just a little bit and we can see this texture popping in. Just like that.
That looks so good.
All right. And if you do something and it's like, whoa, that's too much, you can always play with the opacity just enough, right? Or if that doesn't work, you can actually, and I guess this is one of the differences with digital painting, I can actually just use my soft round opacity or airbrush eraser here and just erase a little bit of the watercolor to kind of back it or make it not as intense, if you will. So
right, you can knock it back.
Yeah, on the gray section here, I'm gonna tap on the layer and hit mask layer content. Is that what I want to do? No, actually, I'm going to make a new layer on top. That's what I'll do. And I'm going to jump to another of my brushes, which is just a little pixel spray or spatter brush here. And I'll use this to then texture this portion of the mouse as well.
Nice.
Yeah, so I'll just kind of hit this like so.
I love what that's doing.
Yeah, you could also, if you wanted to, bring in a texture yourself to Fresco and use that instead of having to paint one. But it's really subtle. And one of the things I try to do when I'm painting digitally or working or sketching, whatever, is maintain a bit of natural feel. So oftentimes I'll even use the pixel spray on something that's meant to be smooth anyways, just to give it kind of a grainy feel.
It makes it look more real immediately.
Yeah, so it just doesn't feel pure plastic, so
right.
that's one thing I like to do. So super simple, keep the lines easy, make it easy for yourself, and then you can kind of add textures as you go. All right.
That's great.
I've shared this document, Renee. I don't know if you've commented on it.
I did. I made some comments. So this is really cool. It just came out. You can share documents with each other. You can't draw at the same time on the same canvas. It's like checking a file out, if you like checking a book out of the library. Mm-hmm. So if you shared this document with me, I could check it out and start messing with it. But I did add comments. So if you go to the comment bar, I think it'll load. If you go over to the far side, and it should show you that you can also, not only can you share, but then you can also add comments. So I can use a little pin and like place a pin and be like, oh, I love this. And can we make this more intense? And you should be able to see my little comments.
Oh, can you make I can make it more intense. Yeah. Layer sandwich. Absolutely. There are Renee's comments on the side. So yeah, really cool feature. It's something I've actually been wondering about for years. When are we going to, and interestingly enough, just feels like something that's so relevant to how much has changed in the last year, for sure, as we've all been working remote and having, I've had so many instances where I've had to pass documents back and forth to different people. So
the nice thing is if you're making changes to the same document, that's what gets tricky, right? You're emailing back and forth. It's final version V2, V4, V5, really, really final. It's like you can't keep the document version control straight. So don't let Adobe do it. That's the whole idea of share for review and also commenting, is that it's the same document. really the same one. And then we worry about the versioning so that you don't have to do that.
So I appreciate your comment about making it more intense. I guess I should respond in the comments, or I could, but let's pretend
you could.
Let's pretend oh, go ahead.
Yeah, well, you can respond in there and you can say like, this is the color that they told me to make it.
Yeah, so I might go more saturation. Is that what you mean?
Saturation, or do you mean hue?
Yeah, so I might say more saturation, and you have an opportunity to respond, and so we can kind of collaborate on a document. And it's even interesting here on Adobe Live because we're doing it in real time, but you can kind of appreciate the power of this feature, I think, and the potential.
See if it'll reply and then show you in real time. I just did on the website.
Oh, all right. Let's see. One reply. There we go. Let's do more saturation. Okay, so to do that, what I'll do is take a look at this color, tap on my color wheel, and I have these sliders, HSB. So I'm just going to up the saturation and jump to my layer and hit lock transparency. And let's use the soft round opacity brush. And
I love how it was as easy as just turning up you have this hue saturation slider. So that's all you needed to do.
Yeah, I just wanted to know, do you mean saturation? Is that what you mean? So there we go. We have more saturation. And just a little tip as well. So there's this layer that I used for the core shadow, and I used a specific color. Well, I can switch the blend mode to multiply, which means that it'll play a little bit nicer with changes in color. So now that I know that Renee's got issues with the saturation, right, and the intensity, and I've made that change, if I get some more feedback that's like, can we make it a different color, I can do that as well. All right.
Right, because you've got your layer sandwich and everything's on different layers.
Yeah.
But you know what? I feel like it resolved my comment. So I'm gonna figure out how to hit like resolve. Is there a resolve? There's totally a resolve button. Yes, I've resolved it. We're good.
Okay, awesome. All right.
And we've got about 10 more minutes.
That's it. Oh my goodness.
Almost 15. Almost 15.
Okay.
So
okay.
You tell me, Spencer, what do you want to show these people in Adobe Fresco for the last 10 minutes?
All right, so I did have a question. I saw a question yesterday and had meant to get to it, and I'd mentioned it today and I didn't get to it. So let's jump to, I'll just use the pencil here. All right, so there was a question about landscape drawing. How do you do landscape drawing? Okay, so on paper, I'd shown you the idea of the box, right? So this is one way to think about it. You think about the relative position of you and this landscape. Just as a general rule, I try to divide my scene roughly into thirds. So this could be where my horizon would be, for example. Somewhere on the horizon, I'm going to have a point. So if I have things that I need to put in the scene, I can reference this point. So maybe there's a house or something. Maybe it's a cabin.
It's got to be a cabin.
Yeah, I showed a modern cabin yesterday, but it could be a cabin, something like that. And this is just 1 point perspective. But if you wanted to do 2 point perspective, we could do that as well. We could do something like this, right? So I'm imagining some point off in the distance here.
Right.
So, and maybe there's, some sort of roof thing here. Okay, this is kind of a weird point of view, but it works as well. So if you break your scene up into thirds, it can kind of help, right? So one I would say is think about your layout. 2, you want to think about your point of view. Okay. And then 3, we're going to think about layers. All right, but to show you 3, I'm going to have to do something a little funky here. All right.
Okay.
So I'll just keep working on this a little bit. Maybe there's some rocks or something. If we have something like a river or whatever, that can be there. But notice that, this idea of perspective is something I'm trying to apply here. I'm just putting these lines to show you the width of the river changes as we move further back in perspective. Okay, as you move further to that vanishing point. All right. Someone's asking, do I do vector landscapes? You could. We could use the vector brush for this if we wanted to, for sure.
I think it's tricky to use the vector for anything that's natural, but I also feel the same way about perspective. So I love that you're doing like a natural looking landscape in perspective, because that's like, I don't know, it's hard for me to wrap my brain around.
To wrap your brain around it. Yeah. So the way I like to think about it, I'll make a new layer and show you here, is kind of like, I'm trying to think of a good visual representation here. Okay, new layer. So let's say this is the foreground. We're going to have midground, and then we'll have background. And this is our vanishing point or line. So I try to break things up this way. So I might draw, you know, my rocks or big things here, and then I may have my structure on this layer as well. And then back here is where I'm going to have my mountains and stuff, right? And granted, there's things that are going to transition in between, like maybe this river like we had. And this is kind of a funky way to think about or view it. But again, coming from a math background, I had to think of ways to have things make sense for me. So I like to kind of slice my landscape into almost planes or slides as I'm drawing. All right. So this is one example of a landscape, you could say. So here, for example, right, this rock, if you will, or thing here, this is my foreground. So this is essentially, I'm thinking of it like a layer in the scene. Okay. And then here's the structure, the home, whatever it is, right here. Okay, so that's in a layer or region of the drawing. And then I have all the background elements here as well. And that's on another layer or element, or section of the drawing, I should say.
It's a smart way to separate things. And I think I don't do enough landscapes, and that might help me
maybe
think about it that way.
And just by way of instruction yet again, there's a box for the house. Okay?
If you can draw a box, you can draw anything.
You can draw a lot of things, right? So this is our horizon line, which means that anything below this, we would be seeing the top. That's why I said it's kind of weird. It's a little bit weird. We're seeing the top and the bottom of this home, for example. All right, but even something like this, we could clean it up real quick, and I'll show you what I like to do with the watercolor live brushes.
It's really fun. And if you missed yesterday's stream, you can go back and watch it. The replays are always available, not only on Behance, but on YouTube. So
especially if you like cars. We did a car yesterday.
We did a car, and we'll figure out who had the landscape question. We'll see if we can be like, hey, we did your landscape.
Yeah, I saw it pop up in chat, and I don't remember who it was specifically, but all right, so let's add some more details here. Maybe I don't want to put a tree there.
Not a happy little tree there.
Not a happy little tree. Maybe this is some craggy cliff or something.
That's cool. Little shout out to Rob Zilla, who just dropped a lightning bolt in the chat for you.
Thanks, Rob.
Pew, pew, pew.
Little neighbor over there. So remember, keep it loose, make it easy for yourself. Don't overthink it. Close enough's good enough in many instances. And don't be afraid to just jump right in and start doing something. Okay. So here's just a loose sketch. So now I'm going to make a new layer, and just below, we'll just kind of wash this with some color. So this is how I work, and why I say, you know, I'm more of a line artist. I do depend on my lines if I'm doing a lot of stuff like this. So now I can pick some colors. The other thing I forgot to mention in the intro is that with perspective, colors also can communicate position, right?
Ooh.
So let's say this is since I'm in Utah, the Utah desert.
Oh, okay, nice.
So we're gonna have some nice, more saturated colors. I'm gonna increase my flow here and the size of the brush. So we'd have more saturated colors up front, for example.
Right, and they're darker, is that right? Things closer to you?
Saturation depends on the position of the light, but yes, your shadows will
Mm,
be a little bit darker as opposed to off in a distance. So off in a distance, I might desaturate my color like so and have a
nice.
less saturated
It's
color.
almost like that atmosphere is in the way.
Exactly. Almost like atmospheric perspective. It's almost like you know what you're talking about, Renee.
I know. Listen, I have to be the protagonist for the people out there that don't know. So I'm goosing you with questions that I know that you know the answer to. It's true. You caught me. Somebody earlier was like, "Oh, I thought Renee was a newbie," and I looked at her stuff, and I was like, "Yeah, no, I'm just being your protagonist, my friend. I'm trying to put on a good show."
So yeah, we could just throw in some color. This is the watercolor detail brush, but I do enjoy,
That looks
you know,
good.
I actually just sometimes just like watching the colors flow, honestly.
Right?
It's so much fun.
It doesn't matter how advanced you are with Fresco or new you are to drawing. Those watercolors are just entertaining.
They are entertaining, absolutely. And honestly, I tend to just bounce between three, which is the soft, the detail, and then the spatter from time to time if I want to add some texture. So
Right. Oof. That's awesome looking. I love how it's bleeding in. The two colors are just sort of.
yeah, it kind of just bleeds in. I shouldn't have the river on the same layer, so I'm gonna make a new layer. That's just to make it a little easier for me as I'm painting this. Okay.
5-minute warning, my friend.
Oh no.
I know, but it's already looking really awesome. I just want you to know where you're at so that we don't lose it at the end. Yesterday we ran out of time. We were having so much fun.
That we were. And we can do some sky tones here. I'll just do this on the same layer.
Ooh, that's a good blue.
All right, so if I spent a bit more time with the lines, for example, I could have this be a little bit clearer, but I'll leave it be for now. So remember, if you have a color and you want to pick something off the canvas, just hold on the canvas here, and we can just apply that color. So there's an example of just using a little bit of that spatter here and there.
Gives it some interest.
A little bit, yeah.
It's really cool looking. And it was so quick. You literally did that in like 2 minutes.
I mean, super quick sketch, absolutely. and the question I get often when I do presentations or things like this is, how much is enough? How do you know when to stop? And that's a great question. I don't know the answer. Just kidding. It depends on what you're doing and what you're trying to communicate. If it's a product sketch, oftentimes I'll just try and move as quickly as possible. And Fresco is really great that way. Remember, and even the technique we used on paper, where we took that camera and just created multiple concepts from that one sketch. That's something you can do to save time as well.
Everyone's like, I need an iPad in the chat. And they're looking forward to your next stream already while you're doing your stream now, which is really, that's just a compliment.
Oh, thanks. So like you were saying, Renee, yes, shadows up front. We can add some nice dark, rich tones here. That's going to help bring things out.
Yeah, that's popping out now. It's really nice.
I think most of my landscapes are the same colors or tend to be. I'm just realizing like, oh yeah, I've done this desert theme before, but I do love the desert here in Utah.
I do too. I love the desert. It's the best. Yeah, I do the same thing where it's like I'll draw the same thing over and over again or the same colors. And I think that's just sort of like a human animalistic comfort zone. I don't know.
Maybe so.
It's not a bad place to be though.
All right. Let's make this a little bit more saturated here. And we'll paint some happy little rocks in the distance.
Happy little rocks. We did have a request for rocks, so let's see that. Ooh, that's good.
Oh, there was a specific request for rocks?
Yeah, somebody said, let's see some rocks. I think it was
Oh man.
Wade? No, it was Wayne. Wayne says, we need some rocks.
Oh.
You rock.
Yeah, so we can start to texture this out a little bit.
We got people all from around the world watching, someone in Norway right now. I think it's kind of late there. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Usman says, I don't have an iPad. That's okay if you don't have an iPad.
Yeah. That's why we showed off the sketching on paper before. We wanted you to know that all the techniques will work whether or not using an iPad or paper.
Absolutely. I'm not being as careful as I normally would be with my lighting here, but here's a little.
It's beautiful. And you did this in like 10 minutes. And now we've got like a minute or maybe 2 minutes till they start kicking us off the screen. And you've got something that's gorgeous.
So they start playing the music. All right. Well,
I know, right? They start playing the music and sending us off. So I better wrap up a little bit. That's beautiful, Spencer. I love it. Oh my gosh.
Super quick.
So thank you so much for joining me for South by Southwest, this special stream. Huge ups to Spencer for being an excellent teacher. Follow him at sketchaday.com, get his brushes, and try Adobe Fresco. And if you can't try Adobe Fresco, try all these traditional techniques that Spencer showed off. Thank you so much, Spencer.
Thanks, Renee. It's been super fun. Remember, when in doubt, rough it out and light till you get it right. And just have fun with it.
It's important. Thank you so much. Bye, everybody.